Welcome back to Studio One, where we are having a very, very interesting discussion with the Honorable BobRae, Member of Parliament. Bob, just before we cut off the break, we were talking about the foreign relations and the decision that the earlier governments have taken, and we are hoping to see something different and positive happening in the light of what Canadian people want. Another subject which we have on the agenda is the latest developments which have been happening on the Libyan front. People are actually starting to ask questions, why are we going and bombing Libya, whereas similar or worse atrocities are being committed in the countries like Bahrain? So what's going on? Why aren't we going after Bahrain? Why are we going after Libya? Why we pick and choose?
Let's put this in some context. I mean, we've seen this extraordinary transformation taking place in the Middle East. Very dramatic changes, which it started in Tunisia. Quickly moved across to Egypt and then across the Middle East, as we all know. Half the population under the age of 25. No governments really reflective of the democratic will of their people. Very old-fashioned, repressive regimes, which are so we're in the process of a dramatic change underway. Canada should be supportive of democracy. We should be supportive of human rights. In fact, as you know, I just wrote a book about this subject called Exporting Democracy. We also have to ask ourselves two questions. One is, what's the right thing to do? The other one is, what's going to work? And how are we going to make it effective? You know very well, and like Pakistanis know, the product of the colonial imperial experience. Even the imperialists came justifying what they were doing, saying we're here to help, we're here to do, but everyone knows that it was
at what cost?
It was a double-edged sword, and that it came with the cost of its own oppression.
Right.
So it's not an easy question. But let's look at Libya. Libya, you had people trying to respond to the oppression, and Colonel Gaddafi is certainly one of the most oppressive regimes anywhere. They were being shot, they were being killed. And then you had an armed revolt, which, because people had no choice, I mean, there is no peaceful way to demonstrate against Colonel Gaddafi. You demonstrate against Colonel Gaddafi, you're going to get killed. So people said, well, the only thing this man understands is force. So there was an armed rebellion. And that moved quickly to some sign of success. And then, of course, Colonel Gaddafi goes back and says, there's going to be rivers of blood. I'm going to kill anybody who gets in my way. We're da-da-da-da-da. And on the edge of a massacre in Benghazi. And it wasn't Canada's unilateral decision or the West unilateral decision to say, as an act of imperialism or colonialism, we're going to go back and take over.
It's an international decision.
Libya was invaded by the Italians, et cetera, back in the 1920s and 30s. This was an international decision saying there is a genuine risk to tens of thousands of civilians, and we have to do something to protect them, and we have to do something to create the space in which some kinds of political decisions can be taken.
Yeah, and we have an effective role in making that decision.
And
so my question goes to that.
So we say Canada will be part of that decision. Now you say to me, why are we not, you didn't ask me the question, well, why are we not in Bahrain, or why are we not in Syria today? We know that there are hundreds of people who've been killed in Syria. And it's a very repressive government. I mean, it is a repressive government in Syria. You have in Bahrain, you have a situation where the monarchy has been slow to change and slow to evolve and slow to reflect the necessary changes in society. The fact of the matter is that the world's institutions, and Canada doesn't act unilaterally. We went into Afghanistan because the UN was involved and engaged in dealing with the post-9/11 situation. We didn't go into Iraq, although Mr. Harper would have taken us into Iraq. We didn't go into Iraq because we said this is not authorized by the Security Council. We don't have the rule of international law to give us justification for going in. But I would say we don't know yet what will happen in Bahrain. We don't know yet what will happen in Syria. And the test for the world is always going to be, what is the right thing to do, and how do we make it effective? There are today a lot of bad governments in the world. There are a lot of repressive governments in the world. Democracy is not flowering everywhere. There are many people in jail because of their political views in China. There are many people in jail because of their political views in Russia.
It's a part of their learning curve. It's part of the learning curve for China.
This is not an easy decision that the world has to make. But the one thing I think that is true is that where these decisions are made, Canada will want to be involved because of our commitment to the rule of law. When the Security Council says to the world, there is a need to isolate Libya, the government of Libya, a need to isolate Colonel Gaddafi, to isolate his regime, we responded quickly, legally, by freezing assets and doing what we need to do. When the UN then said there has to be a no-fly zone so that Colonel Gaddafi cannot use his air power to massacre his own people, we said, well, we will support that. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's why a Canadian, Canadian general is going to be in charge of implementing the no-fly zone. And that, yes, you know, you say is damage going to be done in Libya? Is bombing happening in Libya? The answer is yes, it is. But it is not an attack on the civilians.
My question was not actually why we are bombing Libya. My question was why we are not going.
The UN has asked us to do so.
Right, correct.
The United Nations has said to us.
But my question went more towards why aren't we doing the similar things? Because it demonstrates the political inclinations of the Security Council and the nations which are represented in the Security Council. That's why we are not going into Bahrain.
Let me take issue with you. The Security Council is 15 people, 15 countries. If you say to me, well, they're not going to intervene in the Gulf states for whatever reason, I say, not necessarily. Don't assume that. Don't assume that the United Nations is not going to be engaging in what is taking place in a number of countries. Okay. The way in which we do so will not always be the same. But don't think for a moment that we can be indifferent to what is taking place.
To a certain population.
No, anywhere. Because the rule now is, and this is important, it used to be under the old rules of international law, the rule was about states. And states would say, don't interfere in my internal affairs. This is internal to me. I can do what I like in my own country. That's not the rule anymore. No, the law is what happens to people inside countries is just as important as what happens to governments. What happens to the condition of the people is just as important as what happens to states. And this is where states are getting used to this. I don't think that President Bashir in Sudan ever expected that the International Criminal Court would say, you know, buddy, you can't do what you're doing. You simply can't slaughter your people.
I'm actually going to rest the subject here because you said that, and we're going to wait and see when the when the Security Council
or the International Criminal Court. Is the International Criminal Court going to say there have been abuses that have taken place to which there has to be a response?
Right. Now, you mentioned also that we went into Afghanistan because it was approved by the Security Council and the United Nations approved of that. So let me read a few numbers here. 154 casualties, $18.5 billion, 1 decade, 2,830 soldiers in Afghanistan. 2011 December, they were all supposed to come back. What's going on? What's the policy, and what are you going to do if you come into power as Liberal? If the Liberals form the government, what is going to happen with our policy in Afghanistan?
I think what you will see, I think what you will see clearly from us is a very strong commitment to trying to find a political solution to the challenges that we face in Afghanistan.
Do you think there can be a political solution in Afghanistan?
There has to be.
Well, that's my question. How?
By definition, there has to be.
How?
By definition, there has to be a process. I think there has to be a process that starts in two ways. One is from the ground up. There has to be a process of reconciliation, of attempting to find the ways in which we can build peaceful institutions in Afghanistan and a way of reconciling with populations. The second is that there has to be, and I think Pakistani listeners will understand this when I say this, there has to be a process of a broader reconciliation, a broader reconciliation between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and as well a broader reconciliation between Pakistan and India. Because the politics regionally are critically important. It is not just, there is no military solution. I mean, we have to understand, yeah. And again, you know, everybody knows this, the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan is the line, the Durand line, which was created, which the Pashtun people are on either side of the border. There are people whose relatives are
just across the line.
You know, one's in Quetta, one's in Kandahar. You're here or there, and people go back and forth. The movement across the border is in the tens of thousands every
and quasi-freely
every week. It's very difficult to control the border. So you have this process whereby the insurgency in Afghanistan takes place in the summertime. In the wintertime, people go back to Peshawar, or they go back to Quetta, or they go back and they are trained, and they go back and that happens, and then people re-emerge again the next year. And so we are saying very clearly.
I'm just going to hold you on here for a second. You said the people, civilians crossing the borders, but then you mentioned that insurgencies have taken place in Afghanistan, and people going back to Peshawar and Quetta and these cities and getting trained.
Absolutely.
So what you're implying here is, or what you're saying is, people are getting trained in Peshawar and in Pakistan.
They're getting trained on both sides. They're getting trained on both sides of the border.
Okay.
I mean, people can take exception to that. We can have an argument about it, but I think the evidence is overwhelming. They even talk about the Peshawar insurgency and the Quetta insurgency because that's where the mullahs are, and that's where the ideological inspiration is, and that's what's taking place. When I was I'll tell you a story. When I was in Pakistan in 2005, I went to a conference in Islamabad. And it was about Pakistani federalism, and I was meeting with a number of people from Baluchistan and a number of other people who were at this conference. And we were chatting about things, and somebody said to me, well, Mullah Omar, I saw him on television in Quetta. He was speaking at the hotel in Quetta. It was on television. It was open. You know, so everybody's talking about, well, where's Mullah Omar? And they say, well, he's right here. You know, he's not.
I saw Mullah Omar on the CNN on the television.
But that's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is, we have to understand, have a more sophisticated understanding that there's a political question here, and the political question is not just about saying, it's not just about Pakistan getting tough on the terrorists and etc. It's much more about understanding the underlying issues between Pakistan and Afghanistan, understanding and dealing with the questions between Pakistan and India, even to the point of saying Kashmir is also obviously part of the issue. And so Canadian diplomacy has to be robust and intelligent and engaged on all fronts with our allies, but as well with our friends. We have a long-standing relationship with Pakistan. We have been part of the development of Pakistan from the moment of independence in India and in Pakistan.
Until the 1996 and 1998 embargo on Pakistan. It's time to go to a short break. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about Afghanistan and Pakistan and our foreign policy and what to expect if the Liberals come into power on the elections taking place on 2nd of May this year. So keep watching Studio One. We'll be right back.